you for your very early start today. My name's Barbara Wells. I'm a careers practitioner at La Trobe Uni based at the Bundoora campus. And I'm here, I suppose, to host today and give you a bit of a broad brushstroke over careers in the 21st century and some of the ways that we think about careers these days in making a space for you to reflect on your own direction. So what we'll be looking at today is 21st century careers, a bit of context for working lives these days, and a few useful career theories and concepts. I'm not going to get too deeply into the theory. It's really just a broad brushstroke of things that leads into the cornerstone of our discussion today, which is a panel of MBA professionals talking to us about their career stories with opportunities for questions and answers. Now, as you know, La Trobe is a regional campus, so we have people out there watching us today on Zoom, and hopefully we'll have, so hello people out there in the regions. We'll be getting questions from them at the end of the session as well, and allowing for some informal networking time after the session from 9 to 9:30. Now, I know some of you will probably need to be going off to work at 9. Can I just get a show of hands for who would be heading off at 9? Okay, so about half of you, but you are most welcome to stay if you're able to, and some of our panellists will potentially be able to stay with us too. So our panellists, I'll just introduce them so that you know who these lovely people are here. So we've got Gareth Davies. Gareth is the Group Manager in the Project Management Office at Sigma Pharmaceuticals. We have Julia Reynolds, who's the Director and General Manager at Oztech Surveying and Mapping. We have on the end here, you're sitting out of order. I should have. Mark Buzzer, who's the Global Research Program Manager at the Movember Foundation. And we've got Zach Harvey, who's the Regional Sales Manager at D2L. So I thank the four of you for coming in at this early hour. Each of our panellists has a connection also with La Trobe University, not necessarily through their MBA, and we'll hear a little bit more about that. So the story so far, this is the fourth in 4 seminars around career development aimed at MBA students. And so far, some of the things you've looked at with my colleague Jason Brown are who you are, so capturing your story and the skills on your resume, thinking about what makes you stand out in terms of defining your point of difference and your personal brand, and thinking about how you connect and collaborate in terms of identifying and building networks. In terms of where we're looking at today, we're looking at beyond the MBA in terms of where have you come from, where are you at now, where are you headed, and how you will get there. So it's really about making a space for you to be thinking about where you want to go with your MBA and provide some food for thought. I will send out some notes to you for online resources where you can go a bit further with some of the ideas that I'm going to put on the table. But as a career practitioner, really what I'm about and what our framework is about is that each of you is an expert in your own career and that direction. So I'm going to be putting some questions to you and also some concepts which are there to see that expertise and that direction. The first question I would be putting to you is why an MBA? Why did you choose to do an MBA, and what do you want to get out of it? For many of you, some of those things may apply, and I'm sure that for all of you, the idea of success is a strong part of your motivation, and success is going to mean something different for each of you. At the same time, success is what we measure our achievements by, and it's how we find meaning in our work. So that sense of your idea of success and what that means is a really important thing to have on the table in managing and directing your career. Here's a perspective on what others thought about doing an MBA. When asked if they could have taken an easier, cheaper path to success, a number of people in this article all thought the same thing. Intellectual rigour, the network of peers and alumni, and the confidence they gained from the general business education were essential to their achievements. Maybe some of those ideas resonate for you. Let's start with a bit of an update on careers in the 21st century and our expectations around careers. We all know it's a changing world. New technologies, globalisation, more complex work environments. We're working online, we're working at a distance with people, we're not necessarily working in an office space. Multi-skilling, working with multidisciplinary expert teams, and that's a real trend in terms of that increasingly pointy end in a complex world of having lots of people with their pointy expertise needing to be able to work together on collaborative aims and goals. We're looking at workforce restructuring, an increased pace of change and innovation, and basically that things are going to keep changing more quickly and more often. Importantly, working relationships can be short-term and project-based rather than long-term, and there's a lot more scope for sort of reactive things as they come up. So if we're looking at a typical 21st century career experience, we're looking at 6 to 12 major shifts in an average career. We're looking at lots of new situations, environments and teams, and a mixed approach to work throughout our lives. So we might have times where we're working full-time, times where we're working full-time and also studying, part-time studying, perhaps being involved in caring for young children or elderly parents, ongoing training, large components of voluntary and unpaid work. We might be working on our own independently as consultants, working solo, working in teams, and we're constantly going to be dealing with the unexpected. So how can you know what your job and your industry or your sector will be looking like in 2025? Basically, we can't predict the future, but we can try and look at some of the forces that are actually shaping it now. You would know from your studies, probably in far more depth, about some of those trends and forces that are shaping our world and our workplace. But if I just went to the local level, some of the bigger picture things that we're looking at that impact on our work are in Australia, our transition from our dependence on mining and resources. Traditionally, we've had a highly educated workforce. Now we have a rise in global education. So there's also that global competitiveness for jobs at certain levels with certain qualifications. We're all seeing the impact of ICT and how that's transforming how we do business and how we work. There's a need to develop and focus on the deeper technical skill in ICT around architecting, designing and analysing. We've got big data and the cloud and all of those things. We're looking at a stronger need for innovation to make sure that our cities, as they expand, are more livable. And there's also going to be a need to transition workers out of declining industries. So the figures that are being bandied around, this is a very interesting report that you can get these notes and they're linked by CEDA. And one of the figures they're looking at, and you would have heard this, I'm sure, is that within 10 to 15 years, about 40% of current Australian jobs will no longer exist. It's a massive figure, and it's a massive transition. So if we're thinking about future workers, we've got digital skills up there with reading and writing, increased specialisation, as I mentioned, potential to add value to those specialised goods and services, and an increasing percentage of self-employed workers. And I don't know how many of you are envisaging yourself in the longer term as self-employed and working as consultants. And in fact, self-employment is an aspirational goal of over 50% of our workforce. We're looking at opportunities for agile workers to sell their skills to wider markets. And that agility, that theme of agility and being nimble keeps coming up again and again in the changing world. Increasing outsourcing of activities, inward and outward, obviously that has huge ramifications for business. And what's interesting in terms of the jobs, when we're thinking about those 40% of jobs that aren't going to exist as they are, is that among the most secure jobs are those roles that require creativity and social intelligence. So those leadership skills, those analytical skills, those interpersonal connecting innovation. So how do those ideas connect to the services or business you're planning to deliver? And what's your gut feeling about change? I imagine in the business world, it's all about business opportunities and the need for people who are good, intelligent, strategic, agile leaders who can lead organisations and initiatives through these types of changes. It's all about the context. So your career in a changing world is very much less about having a plan and more about ongoing planning and strategy in response to opportunity, whether that's business opportunity or the opportunities that present to you in terms of your career. And if we were to visualise the notion of career now, it's much less like a ladder. We don't have those long-term organisations where you start at the bottom of the ladder and work your way up. It's much more complex, and I think it's much more like a matrix. There's all of these different factors happening all at the same time, and it's movable. It's a dynamic system. Your lives will change. We're all going to work probably for 50, even perhaps 60 years, and if we think about the notion of work in a quite broad sense, to include study, to include part-time work, to include being a carer, to being out there doing what we traditionally think of as work. It's a much more holistic way of thinking about what we do and who we become and how we contribute. So it's much more dynamic. In that context, my question to you would be thinking about the professional skills that you have in planning, strategy and finding opportunities, and thinking about how you can apply those skills to developing your career. So thinking about skills like forecasting, analysing, researching, consulting with other experts and bringing them on board, creating new ways of doing things, initiating, partnering, refining, managing change, problem solving. All of those professional skills apply to how you develop your career and seek out opportunities. So what do you actually want to do? Goals do remain important. Even if careers aren't linear, we need to know what we're aiming for and where we're going in order to make those strategic choices. However, the way those aims are achieved or realised can be more flexible. Our focus comes out of defining what we want to do or where we might do it and unpacking and addressing those requirements, whether it's in terms of thinking about a specific job and what that needs and then pitching for that, or a particular business problem or solution that we're all about. My next question is really around what you're going to bring to the work you want to do or the work you're doing currently. So what are the skills and interests that you've discovered through your MBA? What are your transferable skills? What are your management, leadership and graduate capabilities? What's your industry experience? And what are your strengths? Because you've all got a unique package to bring to this. Obviously, you're not going to be the only person with an MBA, but you've all got a unique mix that you bring to that process. There is a very important discussion at the moment in career practice and in psychology around strengths. And there's a lot of thinking around tackling the idea of well-being through work, given how much time we actually spend at work. So psychologists are looking at that notion that we spend this much time at work, that's an opportunity to actually create well-being and lives that are meaningful. Positive psychology takes a strengths-based approach rather than the deficit model that previous psychology takes. So instead of looking at what's not working and throwing energy into that, it's about looking at what your specific strengths are and building on those, working out what you're good at and enjoy and doing more of it, and delegating the stuff that you're not good at and don't enjoy. That process can actually contribute to meaningful work and help you find your fit in terms of the work you want to do. It can contribute to your motivation and better performance. And I wonder, does that strengths-based approach also apply to business? In analysing business and looking at what you do and what you do best and what other people do and trying to find that fit. So I guess what I'm trying to provoke is that thinking around that business thinking, that strategic, that research, and how that might apply in both those worlds. And who do you want to work for? Is it a specific industry or sector, particular organisation, thinking about particular communities or clients that you'd like to serve? And is it about specific roles or functional areas of business? And these questions are really around what your focus might be. the types of products, services and problems that your work might address. And if you're making a career transition, there might be issues in actually managing that progression from one area to another. So it might be about leveraging off your skills in one area to move across. And there is some of that discussion around if you are making a career transition, which is a strong motivation for many people doing an MBA, about whether you can actually change at the same time from a role to a functional area, or if it's about moving across. So going back to the idea of careers being a matrix rather than a ladder, sometimes that idea of the type of work you want to do and who you want to work for can involve moving down to move across, or, you know, things not actually going in that linear path. The driving question is really, why do you want to work in that field or role? And that's something that you need to be able to articulate in your conversations, in your networking, in your job applications, but also in your decision making. So my question is really about the values that underpin your work. And this is an interesting way of thinking about work in an uncertain world where we can't predict what's going to happen, but we can perhaps look at our drivers and the things that are in our control. So values-driven work basically centres on aligning with compatible employers, opportunities and business partners, and leveraging off that natural aptitude and motivation. It might be that you're attracted to that notion of making a difference, and that could be making a difference in a social justice sense, or it could be in terms of profit, it could be many things. And where and how are you going to enact those values? And I'm conscious there is a connection and that sort of point of difference with the MBA here at La Trobe around corporate responsibility and sustainability in business. So a values-driven approach to careers can actually help you find your people and find work that's meaningful to you, where you have that intrinsic motivation, and get on board with other people so that you can actually work together, because the sum is always greater than the parts. It's basically bringing it back to what's known, about what you know about yourself, and using that as a driver rather than a specific career destination in an uncertain world. Opportunities to enact specific values. Well, one of the wonderful things about our more complex world is there are lots of different ways to do the work. So we're all hearing about an entrepreneurial approach. There's also the idea of being an intrapreneur, where you take that entrepreneurial approach and work within an organisation. We've got social enterprise. We've got obviously the corporate responsibility arm of many businesses now. We've got work through collectives, not-for-profits and NGOs. And there's also that notion of enacting your values through your personal approach to work. It might not be about going to an organisation that matches what you do. It might be, you might be one of those people who's a change maker from within. And again, that's a personal, it's about that personal guide, what's right for you. I want to just quickly seed a few ideas about how you're going to get where you want to go. Passion, lots of people talk about passion and how important that is in driving their career, in motivating. The thing is, we're not born with it. It's something you've got to kind of fan. We have to grow it and actually match it to real outcomes in our work. But the stuff you care about, the stuff you believe in, the stuff that makes you really mad can be a really great clue to the work that's going to be meaningful for you and the work that you're going to be intrinsically good at and motivated to do. Resilience. We're hearing a lot about resilience these days. Things don't always go to plan, and increasingly we need to manage the unexpected, pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, take risks, fail at stuff, and get on with it. And again, businesses too require that resilience, that flexibility. So the personal and professional actually do connect. They're not separate. Persistence, simple thing. You'd all have examples of persistence. You've all got persistence clearly in, doing your MBA and probably working, and you're all here at 7:30 in the morning to kind of get that extra experience. Tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty. We want to lock things down, but we can't. And sometimes being in that space where things are ambiguous, uncertain, being able to sit with that and work with that is what actually leads to innovation and new ways to do things. So it's about that openness. Getting through that discomfort. There's a notion of happenstance. Is anyone familiar with this? A chance or chance situation, especially one producing a good result. John Cromboltz, he's a career theorist. He talks about planned happenstance, a bit of a kooky idea that you can plan for things to happen accidentally. His thinking is the idea that career development is a learning process, and you can actually create your own luck by strategically increasing your chances for new opportunities to present. So getting out there, having those conversations, having that random conversation, following that little sniff of something that you're interested in or curious about, and going into the unknown, not just staying in your comfort zone. I wonder if you can think of some examples from your own working life to date where something's kicked off by chance. I know it's happened for me a lot, and you look at most people's career stories and there's a heck of a lot of chance involved. But it's also that capacity when the chance comes along to take that leap, to know what you're looking for and take that risk, or jump into the unknown and see what it is. I think we've all got examples of that. I mean, a simple one for me was I made a career change into the work I do now. I needed to get experience, I needed stable work, but I took up an opportunity as a casual at La Trobe Uni. And then being in a casual position, suddenly I was in the right place at the right time when a colleague went off on maternity leave. So I was sitting in her position when things shifted, and when the uni stopped employing more casuals, so I was kind of in a little safe haven. And then in a restructure, new positions were created. I was in the right place at the right time, already having demonstrated what I could do, what my commitment and calibre was in that job. Right place, right time, and right effort. So it's about those things actually converging. There is actually a chaos theory of careers, Robert Pryor and Jim Bright. They look at careers as complex systems that apply to each of us individually, where different factors interrelate and play off each other and lead to unpredictable outcomes, again going into that unknown. And they talk about that butterfly effect, where one small event can actually have a very large and unexpected outcome, the kind of stone in the pond, the ripple effect. Again, I'm sure that applies to business sometimes, that little corner of something that suddenly becomes something more. Flow, who's knowing about the idea of flow? Flow is basically the notion of experiences where we are completely absorbed in the task we're doing, and the task matches exactly our abilities, but also provides just exactly the right amount of challenge. So it's that experience when you're engaged in something and you're completely at one with what you're doing. You hear a lot of those stories. It's why sport can be so addictive, and that's what sort of really piques sports people. That's what keeps them hooked. It's flow. It's what you get when you surf. Also experience it at work and in business. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi has written a lot about flow. Again, I'll send you a link about it. It's a very interesting idea, and it goes back to that idea of the stuff you're good at and you enjoy and the stuff you value and trying to do more of it, and then you're kind of riding the wave of that. Which leads into the idea of job crafting. So job crafting is basically a process of looking at the job you've got and the career you've got and shaping it to match your abilities and interests and strengths and maximise the experience of flow. And it's something you can do as a manager as well in terms of looking at how to get the most out of your people. So it's basically about documenting, assessing and prioritising optimal tasks. So you could use it looking at the current job you do and start mapping and documenting the stuff you find enjoyable and the stuff that adds lots of value and the stuff that's not enjoyable and adds little value, and gradually trying to work things across so that you're all up in this zone. It's a way of making things better with what you've already got. But again, I wonder if you could apply that model in business to look at that strengths-based approach to providing products and services. All food for thought. Lifelong learning is the final one. You can't learn everything you need to know in a uni course. It's a terrific course, but you bring to it, you don't come in as an empty vessel being topped up with information, It's a dynamic process. Lifelong learning, it's about learning from experience. It's about that unique package of who we are, but it's also tapping into, in this amazing world, information and ideas and new knowledge as we need it. Whether it's learning from other people and tapping into experts, whether it's about assessing areas of skill and deciding to do a short online course. You've all heard of MOOCs, so there's Coursera and edX, loads of high quality, free short courses that you can do online to boost that knowledge. We can't go out into the world knowing everything we need to know. That's the journey, and the sort of thinking that I mentioned before around John Crombolt's theories around careers. It's thinking about careers as a progression and a learning process, and that's part of what keeps us interested and motivated and good at what we do. So you need to be a lifelong learner, and it's a changing world, so we need to keep learning because stuff is happening that we haven't done before. Food for thought before we go into our panel. The winners won't be just those with more IQ. They will be those with more PQ, passion quotient, and CQ, curiosity quotient, to leverage all the new digital tools to not just find a job or to find business, but to invent one or reinvent one, and to not just learn, but to relearn for a lifetime. So again, there's that connect between what is there for you personally, but also thinking about leadership and making things happen and similar principles. So key points: accepting change as a constant, applying your professional skills to your career and how you manage your career, being self-aware, being really clear about what you want, what you're about, how that sits, and working to your key values, skills and strengths. Don't do it alone. Connect and collaborate with like-minded people. Whether it's through professional associations, through informal meetups, through the networks that you build in your studies, in your community, it's all around. And get to work on projects, paid or unpaid. The stuff that you're into and you're on about, just do it. Do the work. Find ways to do the work. And keep enacting that in different ways. And finally, being flexible and open to new opportunities and chance events. We can't control it all, we can't manage. It's about knowing what your drivers are, knowing what you're looking for, and being able to take that leap across uncertainty. So we're going to hear some stories now from people who have undertaken the MBA journey. And we'll be hearing from each panellist for about 10 minutes. Are you happy to stay there and talk from there rather than do the podium thing? Is that okay? And just keeping in mind that our Zoom people are there who, hello, I haven't been looking at you enough, I don't think. So we might begin with Gareth Davies. Yeah, sure. And we'll just move across the table in this way, if that's all right. So we'll be hearing a story for probably 10 to 15 minutes. And at the end, we will have scope for questions, both from the group here and also from our regional.
Okay, you'll be in luck because I've got a good booming Welsh voice, so you should be able to hear me. As my wife says, I wish you could turn it down at night time. So I'll go through a bit of my potted career. I think through the presentation, there was a lot of points there that resonated with me and resonated with my journey. I started off, so I'm a bit of a ring-in. I didn't get my MBA from La Trobe. I got mine from Swinburne on the day. But I've got a bit of La Trobe cred. I did a maths degree, so I'm a mathematician by trade. So renowned public speakers, as we are. And then really enhanced my career by getting a computer science graduate diploma as well. So a real people person. I started off working in universities because I came from an academic family, so it was a nice, safe place to work. But I wasn't an academic; I was general staff. And I started off at the University of Melbourne and worked in the epidemiology unit in the Faculty of Medicine. And that was a great learning curve for me because I knew nothing about computer science after doing 1 year trying to study it and knew nothing about nothing because I was a graduate and didn't have much life experience. So it was a nice little safe haven for me to start my career. A very supportive environment down in Berry Street in Carlton and working with the Australian Twin Registry. The benefit for me out of that role was I learned that there was a lot to learn and I knew nothing. It was a place where I understood that I actually enjoyed learning. So that is probably one of the common streams through my career is when I stop learning, I get bored and I move on. So throughout my career, I've had lots and lots of jobs. Some have been my own choice. Some have been through the .com era, which was a fantastic time, both good and bad. So from there, I went on to La Trobe Uni because, again, that was kind of like the family business. I had brothers who worked there, I had a father who worked there, and it was kind of like coming home at Bundoora. And I worked there both at the old ITS, as it used to be called then, and also in the library. And again, great opportunities, great learning, but I kind of thought, university life, I think I've given that a crack. Let's try something else. So again, that's that common thread through my journeys. And okay, so what do I do? So I thought, well, I'll try starting my own business, knowing nothing about business, little or no commercial acumen. I thought I'll give that a crack. Kind of went okay because it was just as I suppose the .com era was starting to ramp up in the late 90s. Was quite lucky. Did a lot of programming in the early days in terms of building websites and all that kind of stuff before anybody was really doing it. Ran a small little development team, that was cool. Then went and worked for an ISP, and that was great as well. The benefit there was, again, completely new environment. The only commercial ISP at the time was Telstra, so along came this little upstart called Connect.com, which probably nobody would have heard of, and that was really great, and that led into that whole .com era. Now, here comes my first career mistake, chasing money. There was a lot of money on offer in the .com era. It was great. It wasn't Wolf of Wall Street material, although one of my fellow colleagues has still got about 2 years left to go on his fraud sentence. But it was interesting times. Everybody got paid well. The work was exciting. It was great, but it did nothing for my career. I learned nothing, and I kind of came out of it as a head of IT, and then .com crashed. Luckily, I could still hold on to the tail of that tiger, and I stayed in that kind of head of IT. But I woke up one day and I thought, this is just Groundhog Day every day as head of IT. It's the same stuff. I'm doing the same thing, and that's when I thought, well, how do I retool? And that's when I decided to do an MBA. I also wanted to change industries. I was very much in the back end, being in IT, so I'm kind of inheriting problems rather than creating problems, so I want to go and create problems. So I went and did my MBA, and I did that 1 foot in changing industry. So I wanted to be a consultant and a management consultant, not just a normal consultant. So the only way I could transition into that management consultant ranks, I thought, was A, to get an MBA, which was kind of true, and B, to transfer my whatever skills I had into a new role, to learn new skills, to move into a new role. So I spent 4 years working for a IT company, so I knew them pretty well. It was a software development company. It was quite successful, based out of New Zealand, and I ran the professional services or the consulting team. So I used my technical skills, I used my people management skills, and it allowed me to then transfer into a management consulting firm. So that journey took me about 3 to 4 years to retool, as I call it, to reskill, to get new skills. So I'm an IT guy, everything's black and white, right or wrong. I had to move into an area of management consulting where everything is grey and everything is uncertain. So I had to make that personal transition myself. And that was predominantly coming from doing my MBA, working with people who weren't IT people, who were quite ambiguous, who challenged my thinking, and it was a real growth journey for me, and I was really lucky to go through that process. Then I landed in consulting. So if I look at my career, there was the technology component, and I was kicking off a new wave of learning, as I called it, and that was in that management consulting space. And they were, and I've just come out of that about 4 or 5 months ago, were really hairy times, right? Because generally when you get brought in, particularly where I was as a consultant, it was after everybody's given it a good crack themselves and they've pretty much got it wrong, and you're their last chance to do it. And I'm not really the greatest person to be given the last chance of something, but I'll give it a crack because I used to like, those kind of hairy moments. So I did that. Funnily enough, I was known as the telco guy, but when I started in management consulting, and I spent 7 years either working down at ANZ Docklands or NAB Docklands, and then suddenly I was the banking guy. So I knew everything about banking now, and when I wanted to go into telecommunications, I was the banking guy, not the telco guy. So it's important to try and manage your career in terms of what people perceive you as being rather than what you actually are. So now I'm the drug guy. So I work at Sigma Pharmaceuticals, right? Completely new industry. I've never worked in pharmaceuticals before. I don't know much about it, to be honest, and I'm learning. And that's what I'm enjoying about my career. And I'm either in the last quarter or the third quarter, if you look at it from a football analogy. So I've either got another transition to happen, or this is where I'll kind of end my career. But for me, it is about, I enjoy the learning process of my career. I have managed it, to your point before, sometimes well, sometimes not so well. But I suppose my parting comments are, define that light on the hill for you, and then that journey for that light on the hill. So if you want to run your own organisation, or if you want to run your own, be the CEO of some place, do that self-assessment, and you can actually get there, plan that light on the hill, and then drive that journey and plan that journey. Some things will go to plan. As Mike Tyson always used to say, he goes, you always went into every fight with a plan, and he goes, and it all went out the window the first time he got punched in the face. So you're going to get a bit of that, probably not punched in the face, but it is about planning that journey. Where I get that soul feeding stuff from is I've been lucky enough through my journey now to be on a board for the statewide autistic services for low-end functioning autistic people, and that allows me to bring what I've learned in my professional career to the rest of the world, and that's where I get a real feed, that soul feeding stuff. So you don't always have to get it from work. I enjoy where I am in my work. I get to do what I get to do, but then it's looking at that complete picture to take that investment that you've done for yourself personally and for your career through your MBA.
Very encouraging to you that idea you present the idea of the whole of you, and it's not all coming through work, that's not all happening out of work, it's all of those different components working together dynamically actually over the whole course of your life. Yeah, we'll do open questions at the very end from everyone. Julia, tell us about your story.
Okay, a bit different. I'm not very good at talking about myself, so I prepared a little script. Okay, I graduated from La Trobe in 2003, and over the past 13 years, I worked for various organizations globally and had the opportunity to develop my skills and experience areas such as profit and loss management, operation management, global sales and marketing, new product development, business strategy, and corporate governance. I am originally from Bangladesh and came to Australia as an international student, went to La Trobe. Prior to completing my MBA, I studied business administration in India, and worked for a steel and bicycle manufacturing company in Bangladesh that has sponsored my education in Australia. After completing my MBA, I returned to Bangladesh to work for the same business that sponsored my education. Initially, I had an inflated ego, thinking that I had an MBA and I knew better than everyone else. And therefore, I was entitled to receive a pay rise. I approached the owner of the company to ask for a pay increase and a promotion. His response was that I had only 2 years of experience plus the MBA degree. He said that he could potentially hire 4 experienced people with the same amount of money I was asking for. Instead, he offered me to take on a project streamlining a loss-making bicycle manufacturing unit, asked me to turn it around, and if successful, then I could ask for a pay increase. I was asked to apply my newfound MBA skills on every aspect of the business that involved understanding the entire operational procedure, including improving operational efficiency, procurement of raw materials, accounts and finance practices, sales and marketing, organizational changes, and working with the people who had ancient ways of thinking. Looking back, I think that was the most intimidating and confrontational conversation I have ever had. My ego got crushed, but I took the offer as a challenge, which eventually turned out to be the most positive and life-changing experience for me. I started learning about the production process and the varied skill set that people I worked with by spending half of the time on the factory floor. I'll be on the road every other week, reaching out to the customers across the country and asking questions to learn about the market and how I could bridge the gap by improving product quality, pricing strategies, etc. I also joined the Steel and the Bicycle Manufacturing Association in Bangladesh to learn more about the industry. I tried to source cheaper raw material from abroad, which gave me the opportunity to travel to India, Taiwan, China, where I learned about their production process. At the end of the day, I was able to bring some of the significant changes to my company's production process, which reduced the cost, improved the brand, and restored the business reputation. The bicycle unit is still running profitable today. I worked for the same company for 2.5 years, and then I returned to Australia back in 2007 and got a job with a steel manufacturing machinery supply company called Bliss and Reels. The steel industry in Australia back then was quickly moving to Asia due to high manufacturing costs, and Bliss and Reel was trying to shift their focus into that direction. I was able to use my knowledge, the steel industry in Asia, and leverage of the support of some of my previous industry contacts over there to capture market share for Bliss and Reels. During my time with Bliss and Reels, I had the opportunity to work with some of the big steel manufacturers in Australia like Smorgon, One Steel, BlueScope, and BHP. I worked for Bliss and Reels for a little over a year and soon realized that the future of the steel industry was dying. Therefore, I decided to move to a more sustainable sector like mining, and I got a job with a company called Gemenex, who was catering to the mining industry. My network and knowledge working with the various project managers in BHP helped me move to Gemenex in 2008 as a marketing and business development manager. Gemenex was owned by an investment bank, Macquarie and AMP Finance, as you may have known about. It is a $300 million company. Their strategy is to acquire new businesses, streamline them, make them profitable, and sell them. Gemenex had 17 different businesses, and I was hired to streamline one of their businesses, which they recently bought, called Measurement Devices Australia, which was a joint collaboration with a UK-based company called Measurement Devices Limited in the UK. MDL designs and manufacture mapping and surveying equipment for the mining, quarry, and oil and gas sector. Back then, MDL products had a very little exposure in the Australian market, which is supposed to be one of the most important markets in the world because mining is very big in Australia. Soon after I got the job, I was on the road every other week, visiting various mine sites in Australia and New Zealand, talking to the mining and geotechnical engineers or surveyors who previously owned MDL products. I quickly realized that the products had a lot of technical shortcomings and problems. We didn't have our training and service center set up in Australia to solve our customers' problems. The first step I took was to get the manufacturer in the UK to help us set up a service center and then retrain all the existing customers free of cost, which helped me build up a rapport and a good relationship with the customers. The next step was to learn about the server practice method and how MDL products could help the customer. I learned about the problems they were encountering with the existing products and how can we improve them. I compiled a report and presented to the UK and the R&D management teams and proposed them to upgrade all their product line with an estimated potential growth in sales if the products were upgraded. The management in the UK took my suggestions on board and decided to upgrade all their products. It was a year-long project, and the business grew up to 40% soon after the upgrade was completed. We relaunched all the products at various expos and surveying conferences where I presented various white papers and case studies about the products. In 2010, MDL UK decided to take full ownership of the business in Australia as a fully owned subsidiary rather than a joint venture with an Australian company. I was promoted to the general manager of Australian operations and asked to rebuild the company with a new brand name and corporate identity. I had to let go of the existing team that I was working with. Meanwhile, MDL globally was also sold to a major publicly listed engineering corporation called Renishaw. I worked for Renishaw. During that time, I worked for Renishaw for 3 years. I was offered to extend the market in the ASEAN countries through the distribution network. I had the opportunity to understand the protocol, reporting system, accounting, and financial practice of a publicly listed company. I should mention here that over the past 7 years, with the same transition, working for 3 different companies, I had 7 different bosses from different parts of the world. They wouldn't change. Under each boss, I had to change my way of working to adjust to their different management styles. Last year, Renishaw went through a major restructuring globally, and the executive team lost their jobs. I was one of them. I wasn't sure the restructuring the plan was going on for 3 years, and then 3 years there's talk going on, there's restructuring happened, the management team, the XCOM team would have to go. Didn't realize that they were planning that in advance, and it was a bit of a shock. Currently, after I lost my job with Renishaw last year, I decided not to go back to the corporate. And I brought all my previous expertise and experience and knowledge from the mine surveying background. I decided to found a company called Austic Surveying and Mapping with the people that I was working with the network that I built up. A few engineers, mine surveyors who also lost their jobs working for different mining companies, they all decided to join me on board. Working in a male-dominated industry like mining has its own unique challenges for women. The management team, key people within the organization, customers, and other important stakeholders are mostly male. Often I showed passion and dedication in the work I was doing. It was instead perceived as emotional or sensitive. I was often misinterpreted for being aggressive when I was in fact being assertive. I think there's a bit of a fine line between assertiveness and aggressiveness. I had to go the extra mile, learn the industry and technical jargon to be the part of the community and to be taken seriously. I had to hire several mentors continuously to help me and develop personally and professionally. I believe that having an MBA gave me an extra edge and opened up opportunities for me more easily. It gave me a strong foundation to stand on and structure to recalibrate my skill set to solve problems. However, continuous self-improvement is very important. Over the course of my career, I participated in various self-development and continuous learning programs that including accounting and finance for managers, workplace occupational health and safety measures, HR practices in Australia. The most important one was emotional intelligence, to be able to work with other people. Public speaking. And another important one, what I was asked to do by my boss is called neuro-linguistic programming. I think this is a very, very important one. I was introduced to people's subconscious mindset, how they are programmed, their background, and how they, the set of belief system they bring it to the table, and how that can affect your workforce and the ways of working, and you adjust yourself according to them. I have professional affiliations and membership with the Australian Mineral Institute, Quarry Institute, Australian British Chamber, Women Resource in Victoria, Melbourne Mining Club, and the Marketing Institute of Australia. I would like to share with you a few tips that I have learned over the few years. Build your network, industry network and contacts. Develop personal selling skills. Develop your own brand and to be the face of the company. Try to be the hunter-gatherer and bring in new businesses. Go the extra mile above and beyond your paid time if you want to excel in your career. Take off your ego hat. Always ask questions and learn. Continuously take inventory of your current skill set and find ways to improve upon it. Have a list of goals and make plans for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. Measure where you are at towards achieving them and how to bridge your current state with your desired future state. Spend money on memberships with different professional organizations. Buy people lunch and hang out with like-minded people. Hire mentors to guide you. Keep a paid mentors and a few unpaid mentors. I found people like to talk about their success and will be very happy to share their knowledge and expertise. Volunteer at different organizations. And whoever you work for, expand your horizon by looking outside the box. You may be offered a job as a marketing executive, for example, but whoever you try to learn who are the customers, the operating cycle, the accounting and finance procedures, upstream, downstream industry, profit made by the company, and hang out with the relevant people for lunch. If you want to learn about finance, set up a lunch meeting with your accounting. Extract value from every experience, good and bad experience, both present and opportunity for learning. For example, you may have a horrible boss, co-worker, unfavorable working condition, job loss, etc. You should accept all of these as challenge that will help you grow and thrive if you can take on them. They are not handicaps. Never burn any bridge. Currently, my goal is to keep developing my executive career and grow the business whilst working on becoming a non-executive director, serving on various boards. That's a different path that I'm heading. I'm a member with the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Last year, I was awarded a scholarship to do the prestigious corporate governance course called the Australian Company Directors course. I serve as a director on the board of the Australian Institute of Mine Surveyors. It's a national body that provides professional representation to the government, industry, and educational organization on mine surveying regulations and legislative issues in Australia. Earlier in my career, I also served on the board of the Melbourne Junior Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And I was also sent to, I went to Japan representing JCI Australia at a leadership program. And that also helped me improve my networking skills. Talking about yourself can be a bit difficult, but that was also a platform helped me get through that. One of the major challenges I had faced during my career is the amount of time spent away from my family, my husband. That was the overseas trip and the interstate trip. Starting a family had become a challenge during the growth phase of my career. There is always a speculation, when is she going to have a baby? I've been happily married for 9 years, and I had a very supporting husband. You need a supporting partners or parents or friends or a group of people who believes in you. I'm happy to say that despite all the challenges, we're expecting a baby in October. So there is a ways, sometimes I get asked these questions, can you have a work-life balance as a woman, and how starting a family can affect your executive career. you can have it all, may not all at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. You fitted a lot in there, and a lot of really fantastic insights, not just in terms of the processes that you've been through and the many changes that you've managed, but the personal qualities that you've brought both to your work and managing change, particularly around the going out and actually listening to clients and listening to people. And you described very really well that experience of coming out with your MBA and seeing yourself in one way, and then being really open to that learning experience and that challenge, and getting past the kind of perhaps the defensive stage that we all get, that sort of that block, and moving through that to learn and reinvent, and then keep applying that learning in new contexts as well. And I love the story about what you've made of your job coming to an end last year, and being able to actually take the best out of that in terms of your networks and your skills, and actually build something completely new out of the ashes, that sort of phoenix coming out of the ashes.
When I was my boss from overseas, okay, so there was speculation going on that they're going to let me go. So the idea was I was managing the Australian operations, including Australia and Southeast Asia. So the intellectual information, everything, were like all it was in my head. And what they couldn't do is just let me go, even though it's a publicly listed corporation. They have their own policies, but Australia had a unique HR system. They just couldn't let me go. And then the company had a lot of reputation, and then KPMG said, oh, well, if we just shut down this business and then restructure the whole business, the balance sheet would look a bit different. So they had to keep me for at least a year and a half, and hire an external consultant to extract all the information from me and then let me go.
Wow.
And so, and I knew what was all going on. I still decided to cooperate. They hired the external consultant. There was a lot of abuse. There's a lot of very, very subtle, ways of abuse, and I put up with all of that for a year and a half, and then decided, okay, no, I'm not probably going to negotiate anymore. And I decided to draw a line. I asked the management team, the board, to come down here and offer me what is there for me. When they said, okay, we have eliminated your role, no longer exist. So what I thought back then, oh, okay, the world going to fall apart, and what I decided there was an event, and I thought maybe this could be an opportunity. And event can happen in your life, job loss, death, there's 7 years of service, and how you wish to record it in your brain.
Yeah.
So I decided to record that as a positive experience, and that could be a turning experience, life-changing experience for me to be owner of a business and build it and use all my passion, and don't have to please everyone else every day. Because half of the time I was doing politics. Yeah. Honestly speaking, working for these big PLC, half of it was work and half was politics, pleasing everyone.
Yeah, that perspective is, and being able to shift your perspective, very powerful. Thank you very much.
That's okay.
So Zach Harvey, Regional Sales Manager for D2L. Let's hear some of your story.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Julia. That was fantastic. So my current role is Regional Sales Manager for a global education technology company called Desire to Learn, or D2L for short. So I've spent the past 8 years in the industry of all things learning technology and content within the corporate, government and education sectors. I'm quite passionate personally about the value of education and lifelong learning, and particularly the area of where technology is involved and the positive benefits that technology can create for individuals accessing learning, accessing education, and the positive effects that has on organisations, society as a whole. So in this time, I've performed in various positions, such as Director of Sales and Marketing for APAC, general manager of the Australian operation at 2 different companies, and I've held management positions in sales, marketing, and business development. It's interesting to think about my career journey and look at how this aligns with my MBA studies. Being asked to speak here today made me reflect on that. And I remember when I was studying my MBA, how often, and you know, when I was sitting kind of in your shoes right now, how often we'll be discussing something in class that week, and the very next week that would come up in the workplace. So you'd have an instant opportunity to actually enact some of the learnings from your studies. I started studying my MBA with La Trobe in October 2009. I'd had initially, prior to that, I'd completed an undergraduate degree in marketing. I had a marketing background, and I'd only had 4 years of work experience when I'd landed a promotion and commenced in the role of general manager of our Australian operation. I had responsibility for 30 staff at the time, and for the first time I'd actually had to manage a team of managers as well. In addition, team managers. At the time I was only 27, a number of my direct reports were twice my age, and my wife and I had just become first-time parents, and we had a 6-month-old baby. So I remember at the time being a little overwhelmed, probably just as some of you are at the moment, or have been during the course of your studies, or probably will be if you haven't been yet. Trying to juggle jobs with a lot of responsibility, balance with your personal and family life, and then of course your studies on top of that. It's certainly challenging. I'm not sure, does this resonate? Yeah, I see a few heads nodding. Hang in there. It's very much worth it. I can guarantee that. I completed my MBA in April 2013, some 3.5 years later, and it wasn't actually until I finished my MBA that I think I really realised how much the additional burden and workload was at the time. It was really kind of reflecting back in the next 3 to 4 months, thinking, gee, I don't have a new class to start next week or an assignment due this weekend, or I can actually just, maybe just sit down and watch television at night or something like that. But in that 3.5 years while studying, I'd also changed employers. So I accepted a new role with a UK-based corporate e-learning and learn tech provider that were wanting to expand in the Australian market. It was a true startup role, and I was tasked with leading that expansion and building a business from the ground up in a new region in a highly competitive landscape. And on a personal note, we'd also added to our family, adding another 2 babies in the mix as well, just to keep me on my toes. So what has changed for me through the MBA? So, whilst this is a difficult, question to quantify exactly, I can honestly say that the answer is a significant amount. But even greater than that is the pace of change that's happened around us in that same period. So as a society and technology as an economy, it's staggering to think just that pace of change and how that is still occurring at the moment. It's interesting to hear Gareth mention about the dot-com bubble. I wasn't kind of working at that time; I was still at high school, but I'm old. I wasn't trying to point that out, but it's really interesting kind of at the moment. So when I started my MBA in 2009, October 2009, the iPad wasn't released back then. It's interesting just to think that. And this year, I did a little bit of Googling last night, this year the iPad will actually outsell computers. And then in regards to kind of internet search traffic, social searches are now starting to drive more traffic to company websites than, say, Google searches. So the pace of change, and I think Barbara touched on it a lot in her presentation, which was good, is really quite significant. And just last week I was on my way back from Perth, and I watched a documentary on the rise of Netflix. So do many people here subscribe to Netflix, use Netflix? The Australian one or the US one? The Australian one. So it mentioned in that documentary that in 2004, Blockbuster Video had it was a $4.3 billion company, and Netflix had annual revenue of just $5 million. So it's incredible to think that in the space of less than a decade, Netflix has revolutionised the entertainment industry and distribution, and Blockbuster is bankrupt. And personally, I've had a couple of similar scenarios in my career, although probably not to that scale. So two of my former employers, one was an established brand, nearly 40 years with a dominant market position, strong year-on-year growth and high margins. In fact, margins that I would love to have right now. The company pretty much disappeared within 5 years as the market changed underneath it, and it was too slow and too cautious to respond in a meaningful way. In contrast, another former employer of mine started with 4 colleagues working in the front bedroom of one of the co-founders' house, and within 8 years grew into a global market leader, employing 350 staff in 8 countries. And I'm sure that you all probably have a similar story or can relate to a similar thing. I've got no doubt that not only did the La Trobe MBA equip me to survive in this rapidly changing business environment, but it actually, in fact, allowed me to thrive. The MBA has given me the ability to examine and assess both the internal and external environments in a systematic and methodical way. It has given me the confidence to act swiftly, make considered decisions, and capitalise on opportunities. It's also assisted me in developing great people around me and leading high-performance teams that I've been able to rely on to deliver results. So these were probably all things that I expected to learn prior to commencing my MBA with La Trobe. I'm not sure what kind of your feelings were going in, but they were probably areas that I would have hoped to have learnt. However, in somewhat of an unexpected benefit, I believe I was also able to gain a greater ethical and social conscience as part of my studies. And I think, again, some of the things Barbara touched on is something I'd never really come across, been exposed to, even really thought about. And that's how examining the underpinning values that drove me from both a career and professional perspective that I've been able to stand by as I've had to sometimes make some extremely difficult business decisions in the years to come. So how do we individually develop our careers and open up opportunities within the rapidly changing business environment that we're experiencing at the moment? And again, I'm probably repeating some of the things that Barbara and Gareth and Julie have already said, but my first recommendation is to take absolutely every opportunity to put in practice the things that you learn as part of your MBA, to really get a deep understanding of the business application. It's great to learn about the theory, but it's the real life application that adds value. And the more value you can add to organisations, obviously the better it is for you, because I think that's what, generally speaking, we're all about. Ensure that you test your MBA concepts in the workplace. If your role doesn't allow you to do this, or if it only allows you to do it for some of the things that you've learned, do look beyond your workplace or in other parts of the business. Look for special projects. If there's no opportunities within your business, then look beyond your organisation. So outside of work, so it might be volunteers, charities, sporting clubs, even if your friends have a business, or consulting opportunities with other companies. I've been able to pick up a moonlighting engagement with a company based in the UK. Over the past 18 months, I've been paid a consultancy rate for 4 hours per week, providing them strategic consultancy advice to them. It's things that I can't do in my day-to-day job. It's not really as applicable, but I get to exercise some of those things and I get paid for it. And it replaces that void at night, which I don't know what to do because I'm not doing an MBA assignment. At every opportunity, think, can I integrate something I learnt from my MBA to help solve this problem or improve the situation? The benefits of this are immense. Not only will this help you grow as an individual, it can really open up opportunities, help you meet new people and get in front of people you may not have been able to get in front of before. It also provides an opportunity to take best practice into your organisation. It will challenge the status quo, drive your organisation forward, and you'll get recognised on the way through, which is also very nice. The other area that I found extremely helpful, and Julia touched on this also, was having a mentor. just a show of hands, who here has a mentor at the moment, a professional mentor? So there's a couple, so three or four. So I'd really encourage everyone to consider getting a mentor. I've been extremely fortunate. It wasn't something I planned. I was lucky. I had people higher than me that imposed it on me, and it was the best thing. I touched on earlier, as a kind of 27-year-old with a marketing background, no significant kind of management experience as the general manager of our Australian business. I got paired up with a mentor that was pretty much the complete opposite of me. Engineering background, he had 40 years in business, is CEO of large companies. So he was just the model of calm, methodical consistency, everything that I wasn't. And he'd actually done his MBA at La Trobe as well, and we were able to connect. Really, probably about the only thing we had in common was that. And we were able to connect quite well because of the content of our MBA. But that was just one example of one of my mentors over the years that has been invaluable for my career. Network. Again, it's come up already, but during and after your studies, it's amazing how diverse all the careers of your fellow MBA students, even the people sitting in this room and on this panel. I feel like I've learned so much already. And you just never know that the person sitting next to you may be the CEO of your main customer in a few years' time. So finally, I'll just touch on, and again, kind of Barbara did raise this as well, I'd encourage everyone to continue to explore what you really want from a job, from an employer, from a family and lifestyle perspective. Be really fussy. Get specific about the type of environment you want to work in, the industry that you want to be involved in, and the caliber and credentials of the leaders that you want to work for. And I think that's really important as well. Once you find those people or organizations, just get out and engage them, either using social media, stalking them on LinkedIn or Twitter and things like that, but really engaging them, or reaching out more formally to start a conversation. You never know, just shouting someone a coffee in return for 15 minutes of their time could open up significant career opportunities for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Zach. And some really great things in there, including the work-life balance thing and the connection also between values and how you do business, particularly around difficult business decisions. And then that line between personal and professional, how you feel about your work, how you feel like a congruence or alignment with the work and decisions you're making, and lots of practical tips and you've got a very clear sense of your motivations and your values really around what drives you. Thank you very much. Mark Buzzer, last but not least, lots more gold here, I'm sure.
Well, I'll try and keep it brief so we can have some time for questions. So feel free to hit me up with more questions if you want. But so my career is quite a diverse one and a unique one, I guess, as everybody's is. But I started off my career, I guess, did an undergrad in biological sciences at La Trobe. That's my La Trobe connection, and then went on to do an honours year at La Trobe as well in human genetics. So that was my La Trobe connection for 4 years, and that was sort of, really gave me a good foundation in the sciences, and sort of was the springboard for my career in terms of the fact that I then went on and did a PhD at Melbourne and did a PhD in molecular medicine. So essentially looking at the genetics of inherited kidney diseases. So worked with paediatricians at the Royal Children's Hospital and doctors around the world trying to find the genes that were associated with these inherited kidney diseases and trying to come up with better tests to help kids and families to understand the treatment direction that they could take. So after my PhD, I guess I could have gone in two different directions. I could have gone into academia and gone into postdoctoral research and, become an associate professor and a professor and all of that kind of thing. And that was certainly on the cards. And I had a couple of postdocs lined up. Some friends of mine that I did my PhD with had also made the move into the dark side, into industry, and had I realised quite early on, I guess, in my PhD that being at the bench, with your lab coat on and your glasses and sort of pipetting away wasn't really for me. I was much more of a people person. And so while the PhD gave me and the undergrad gave me a really strong foundation, it really wasn't for me. So industry and the opportunity to sort of broaden my horizons that way was certainly appealing. So I made a move and became what's called a clinical research associate in the pharmaceutical industry. So working for a large French pharmaceutical company, and there I was working on very, very different, therapeutic areas. So diabetes, cardiovascular disease, central nervous system disorders, and running large global phase 3 clinical trials. So very large R&D projects. At that stage, I kind of went, okay, well, I've got this PhD, which is quite, academic, and I've got this, really late phase industry experience, but I kind of wanted to bridge the gap a little bit. So I thought one way to do that would be to move into the biotech sector. So I made a move into biotech and ended up working for a small publicly listed biotech company in Melbourne called Virax Holdings, which was and essentially working on HIV vaccines, so working in sub-Saharan Africa with virologists and clinicians, really hands-on. Not me, but the clinicians, were working on mine sites, and so essentially trying to, essentially come up with a new cure for HIV, which is really interesting. At that time, I decided that I wanted to do something just a little bit more to broaden my career along the lines of what Barbara was talking about. I thought that was, a great introduction, Barbara, by the way. So I started my MBA at RMIT. I originally started a business and biotechnology degree, and then transferred it into the straight MBA because I was really enjoying the strategy and leadership and management type subjects that I was learning about. So for me, my career is kind of about, I guess, pre-PhD and post-PhD and pre-MBA and post-MBA. And I kind of, for me, having both of those qualifications and background sort of has, I guess, defined me in terms of my career. Not many people have that kind of combination. So it's kind of, for me, it's about leveraging off that slightly unique background. So for me, after I was finished up in biotech, I worked there for 3 years. I finished up at my MBA at about the same time. I really wanted to make a jump that would challenge me to go outside of my healthcare background. So I took on a role, one of the very senior advisors to our board in biotech actually was a consultant, and sort of poached me over to work on a strategy consulting assignment where I was working in the mining industry of all places. No idea about mining. I wish I knew Julia back then, but unfortunately I only met her half an hour ago. And so my role there was to essentially work across, this is a global company, 66 billion euro revenue, top 5 chemical company that was wanting to diversify all of its products and services into a mining business unit or business channel. So I didn't have any experience in mining or chemicals for that matter, but I had a PhD, and people knew that, and they obviously thought I had a PhD in metallurgy, and so they would sort of speak to all these high caliber metallurgists would speak to me in all this kind of mining talk, and I just take a whole lot of notes and go, oh yeah, of course, absolutely, and then Google all the terms and sort of come across, so sort of fake it till you make it kind of thing. So a little bit like Gareth's experience there. But what was really interesting there was it was all about landscape analysis and market analysis and all it was essentially the practical application of my MBA. Because I didn't have the subject matter expertise, I had to apply everything. So it was all about frameworks and just really applying everything, and it's all I had really to be credible. So that was a fantastic experience, but it was a short-term 7-month contract. And then so again, I wanted to leverage the PhD and the MBA again, but move back towards healthcare and sort of be able to, I guess, satisfy both sides of my brain, I guess, the business and the healthcare side. So I ended up working in a senior management role at the Australian Red Cross Blood Service. So that was a really interesting opportunity to come in, and this is where I've kind of learned about myself. I like to come in where there's no particular project or no initiative in place and create. So essentially, write the business case, get the funding internally, work with the executive leadership team and the board, and sort of, develop the stakeholder relationships internally or externally, and both, and then really create something that sort of, is your own, I guess, product and your own brand, and then sort of deliver that back. So that was a really interesting opportunity for me to develop a program that had 9 projects underneath it, each one representing a different business unit within the organisation. So in terms of, how the MBA helped there, well, it just sort of helped to talk the talk, in general terms, being able to talk to the finance people about net present values, and being able to talk to the marketing people about, and all those things coming about the 4 Ps, and, being able to talk to, strategy with the CEO, and being able to, talk about it, just the MBA gives you that really strong foundation by which to feel confident and comfortable to talk to a myriad of different people and stakeholders within the organisation and externally. So that was a really interesting role. Finished up that program, developed it back and sort of disseminated it back into the business as usual, and then moved on to my next role, which is, so for the last 4 years I've been at the Movember Foundation, so mustaches essentially, but the mustache, now is in 21 different countries, and Movember now raises, $120 million a year globally, and so I'm fortunate enough to be able to invest about 40 million of that into running the program that I run, which is called the Global Action Plan, which is essentially bringing clinicians and researchers together to integrate in their research by global collaboration, and to really come up with, trying to sort of dovetail everyone's thinking towards coming up with better cures for prostate and testicular cancer. So for me, again, there's elements of strategy, and because I've got the MBA and the background I do, you kind of get drawn into these special projects and these strategic projects. And I think, as Zach said, and Gareth, it's about giving yourself the opportunity to move into those, and because it's good, you get kudos internally, but also you broaden your skill set. So that's sort of my my experience. We continue to grow that program. We bring in, I've got a team of project managers now that report into me, and I'm trying to sort of move away from that program a little bit, because my team are now unleashed to sort of empower them to run that program, and I'm sort of starting to move into a whole range of different other strategic initiatives. So in terms of what your sort of talk resonated with me, Barbara, I think the things I kind of learnt about myself throughout that career journey is that I'm much more of a generalist. So you can either be a specialist or a generalist. Specialist, you obviously have these very, very deep, strong subject matter expertise in 1 or 2 different careers. As a generalist, you can't do that. You've kind of got to really have a very strong foundation, float across a lot of different disciplines. And I sort of found that being a people person and an extrovert and someone that really likes to engage across a lot of different activities, and gets bored easily in one particular discipline, that was for me. So I mentor to MBA students at MIT, and the thing I sort of try and get them to understand is, are you a specialist or are you a generalist, and sort of try to tell your career that way. So being a generalist is obviously trying to, use your networks very, very effectively, and so the MBA is fantastic for that. But again, I would, agree with everybody in the sense of, buy people lunch, have a coffee, never turn down that opportunity to stay for a sandwich after a particular event like this. And I would also sort of agree that, the values-driven side is, and, the feeling of making a difference is really, really important, and finding out who you are and what makes you tick. I'm sort of quite proud that, my little daughters, I've got 2 little daughters, and both of them kind of wouldn't know exactly what I do, but they would in general know that Daddy tries to help sick people. So there's because that's kind of the, that's my passion. So whether it be, an HIV vaccine for people in Africa, or whether it be, the blood service in terms of plasma products for people who've had, road accidents and trauma, or whether it be people with prostate cancer and testicular cancer, it's about trying to sort of find what makes you tick and where your passion is. So probably got lots of other, words of wisdom, but happy to throw it open to the panel.
Okay. Thank you so much.
That's okay.
Terrific things there. Your own strengths, and also being able to leverage, get really strong in an area and then be bold in being able to leverage off that strength to go into an unknown area, and to be smart enough to be the dumb person, to go in and not know, but be able to bring what you do know into an area that you don't know and bring it all together, because we can't do this life individually. That's how we, that's how humans got to be in buildings like this. We didn't do that as individuals, we did it collectively. So some really good stuff in there. Obviously clarity about your values, but also that stuff about your temperament, knowing yourself in terms of your personality and being a people person, and keeping on going for that, and also making the work you do supersede you, that you've brought good people on board, you've created something and you're ready, you know when to move back and go to the next thing. And that's really important, I think, in managing personal change, but also organisational change. I would imagine there's good connections there. Thank you all. Let's just give a collective round of applause. Very, very generous and very great stuff also about the guts of work-life balance and around. So, open to questions. Hopefully we'll get some from the floor. I do also have an evaluation sheet, so please, if you can, before the end of the session, I'd like to just make sure you can fill that in for me. So, questions from the floor?
You all talked about the MBA, and I suppose there's a question, could you have got where you were without it? Collectively.
Yeah,
Is it like a straw poll?
I mean, sort of looking back now, I mean, you all of you spoke about the MBA, but you've all got drive, and I don't think people get got drive it. You doing something. Do you look back and you think, I couldn't have done it without it?
I think to Mark's point is, I couldn't have changed career without it because I didn't have the skill set. I was really a subject matter expert, but deep down I needed to be a generalist. So for me, I couldn't have changed industries, I couldn't have changed roles, and that would have led to a really boring career, like just doing the same thing day after day. So I couldn't have changed it. It changed me as a person, and as corny as that sounds, it really brought out the right side of my brain, which hadn't really been brought out. So I was very much a left brainer up until that point. So for me, it was a great experience, and I wouldn't have got this role without the MBA. It's not the be-all. It's just the tool set I bring along with me to work. But because of that, it stimulated a lot of other learnings that allowed me to get this job. So my people skills are much better than they were, 10 years ago. My ability to, as Mark was saying, relate across. If we're going to sit down and talk about balance sheets, it wasn't like Google. It was, okay, I get that, and what that we need to work out what the net present value is, and blah blah blah. So that's where it really assists, and you really bring that Swiss Army knife of value to the business at that point.
that's a great analogy. Can I quote the Swiss Army knife thing?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah, look, I think definitely it's really, I think, kind of what you do with the MBA and how you use it, and it's not an isolated thing, I don't think, but definitely the things that have led to and the skills developed. I know, for example, when we were doing kind of the startup and building the Australian business in my previous role, I took a completely different approach to that, that having the foundation of the MBA, I guess 2/3 of it at that point behind me, I put a lot of those things in practice. I probably wouldn't have if I hadn't been studying my MBA at that point.
I'm just trying to remember, you changed roles during the MBA?
Yeah, that's right.
Everyone else changed roles during, or did you find after, or?
Straight after for me.
Straight after, during, after.
I can't recall. I've had too many jobs.
Yeah.
But it was after. Yeah.
Well, actually, no. I started, when I first started my MBA, I really leveraged that and made a move probably 2 or 3 months after I started. And I think just starting the MBA was enough to probably really help me to make that first transition. And then at the end of it, 3 years later, I'd sort of really come to the completion of that role and, given to it, and it had given to me as much as it could, and then made the move straight after that.
I think it depends how you'd like to use it. This is like a tool, or you are a person behind the tool. You have to have the passion where you would like to go. And then using the MBA, for example, if you're sitting in the classroom and there's a lot of theories going on, like when I was doing my MBA, I only got think 55% in in the management and accounts. There's a course, management accounting. I only got 55%. That brought my the average grade down to. Later on, I actually become an expert doing budgeting and reading the financial statement. It was all in my subconscious mind, and then when I had the opportunity to apply, it all started to come back. And yeah, it gives you the foundation and the structure, but the person behind it, how they would like to use it. Another example, you have to keep continuously modifying yourself. When I did my MBA, I would be doing assignment that were like big, that thick. I got told off. When I did business plan for the corporation, and I got told off. No, you're not doing your MBA assignment. You need to tailor it to our needs. And then I had to actually produce the whole big assignment, synthesize it, and then in 3-page document because the board wouldn't have enough time to go through the assignment. But it gives you the foundation to concise the whole assignment to a 3-page document and convey your message. Yeah.
Some questions from our regional viewers. Nothing's come through. Okay. Any more from the floor?
Another one. Sorry. One of those things, people always ask you when you go on holidays, what's the best thing about your holiday? So, I just asked, if you had to pinpoint something about the MBA or at that time, what was the big takeaway or the highlight, or just something that you go, that was fantastic?
For me, it was the cornerstone subject, the last subject that I did. So obviously got a lot out of all subjects because, it's that generalist, across the board, walk the talk thing. But for me, the subject called implementing strategy was absolutely fundamental. And it was that absolutely fundamental leadership and sort of business vision at the very, very top, and then all the way cascading all the way down, and then essentially creating the optimal workplace. It's all very well and good to develop a strategy, and that's really critical, but it's the actual implementation and the frameworks that you implement strategy was really fundamental for me, and I took a lot away from it.
There was a subject called business strategy, and I remember we had there was an academic who wasn't teaching us. There was a consultant from outside organization coming and teaching us, and we actually learned a lot about. There's a theory called Porter's 5 model, I forget, 5 forces, and that you can apply in any business. If you even, for example, the business that I have started, mind surveying and mapping, the first question was the barrier to entry. So, and exit, the rivalry. So that is something that is very, very important, because you just don't want to open up a milk bar and someone else is coming next door to you and starting another one, and you're out of the business one day. So I think that subject opened up our eyes to the unique resource and capability that you need to have to serve at the corporate, to start your own business, or even manage people. So the unique resource and capability, that is your core strength. Understanding not understanding. It is inside you, and as well as within the organization. Understanding and recognizing that and utilizing that is the best capacity of anyone. If you want to go ahead and it's in the corporate world or in starting a new business. So I think that subject was very, very important, practical, very, very practical.
I think you'll find as you go through, if you haven't already done it, is that I've gone through a lot of strategic development in lots of organisations, because I've worked at a lot of organisations, and most of them can do a corporate strategy. Some can then do that business unit strategy. Very few can execute that strategy, right? And there's a quote, I don't know who it is, and they say a poor strategy executed well will trump a great strategy executed poorly. So I think where I really got my benefit out of the MBA was around, there was 2 courses, one at the very beginning which was just, I really couldn't get my head around it because I was very left brain. it was around organisation dynamics, the old storming, forming, norming type stuff. And then towards the end there was strategic consulting, and that was really about building softer skill sets to allow you to influence within organisations. And the key takeaway that I took from that was around the role of the influencer within the business. So when you're a consultant, and Mark probably had a similar experience, you go in there, you have no authority. You just walk in there as the expert who's going to come in and try and affect a change. So you can only affect the change through influence. Now you can take that skill set, whether you're an external consultant or, in my view, what I do as an internal consultant is that I have authority for all my staff, right, line management. My role is defined as being execution only, but I reckon half the day people are sitting in my office asking my opinion, right? Whether it's right or wrong, they think that there's some value out of that, right? And that's because I've learned to influence by saying, by getting them to do the whole. So what do you think, what direction do you think you should be going in with that? Or what do you think the outcome of that? And getting them to reflect back and think through it, because they think I'm giving them the answer. I'm not. I'm just facilitating them to get an answer. And I predominantly play in that C-suite, right, all the time, right? And you think the people who are at the C-suite are the real movers and shakers, but they all have skill sets, strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes you have to support their weaknesses to go forward. So that's what I really got out of my MBA, was all that right brain, soft skills, influencing skills, and that really has assisted me. I don't get as frustrated as I used to, because I go in, rather than going in with that, what you should do is, right, it's, so what do you think you should do, right? And it's the same it's the same dynamic, just a different approach.
Last chance. There was gold in that, thank you. I hope that you've all got something out of today. I think there's been a lot of richness in there, lots of layers, hopefully some inspiration, but also some really good stuff about the guts and realities of work, particularly, the reality of workplace politics and managing change and managing yourself and the people side as well as the business side. So again, thank you all. Thanks all for making the early breakfast. I hope it's been worthwhile. You're welcome to stick around just to informally have a yak with panellists, myself, one another. I believe things are still out there. And Manisha, would you like to do the say a big thank you? Hopefully you can all
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Not too early, is it?
Never too early.
Thank you very much. Morning tea.
Morning tea. Thank you. And I will send you out links and things that you can follow up some of the concepts on. And it'd be great to get your evaluation plans too. We haven't done this before, this seminar series. So it's new ground for us. So your feedback can help us shape something up for next year. And who knows, perhaps we'll be following you on LinkedIn and having you up here in the future. So best of luck.
One more thing. So I've got 6, 4, 2, and 5 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you very much, and thank you for the early start.
It's fantastic.
So did we have